You guys both come from a background where you worked at Disney, and now you're doing a picture for DreamWorks. Without getting too terribly political about it, can you talk about maybe some of the differences, like positives, negatives, or whatever, coming from a background like that and then going to work at DreamWorks?
Well, more freedoms, we can talk about the positives, which, and this is kind of recognized industry-wide right now. The great thing about animation is that you're always going to work with people you know, and coming to DreamWorks, I ran into more people that I used to work with at Disney than maybe at Disney now. Since they transitioned into a largely 3D studio, I don't know as many people. But DreamWorks is a really, really healthy studio at the moment because they've had success with some of their franchises, and it's allowed them to branch out and try different things. And I think our movie is a great example of that. They largely charged us with and didn't challenge us on too many of the decisions that we made, and allowed the film to be taken in a direction that was very much colored by our particular sensibilities. And that's happening across the studio, and what you end up with is a studio, a large studio that has no house style. Yeah. And that's great, and I don't think that can be said of Pixar or even Disney at the moment, because as inventive and fresh and cool as a lot of the Pixar films are, there is a little bit of a house sensibility to it, and it's not so present at DreamWorks I think in a really positive way, because it allows so many different types of movies to get off the ground.
Yeah, it really is a studio in the best sense of the word. Everything that's going on right now looks very, very different from everything else, and they all have a very different vibe. And one of the things that we were excited about was when this film that we were working on started taking on its own special, particular vibe. They just really encouraged that, and we're thrilled that it was breaking new ground visually and even story-wise.
Talk a little bit about the voice actors that you used in the movie, because there's a heavy Scott influence with Gerard Butler, Craig Ferguson. You've also got Jay Baruchel, who's everywhere this year, apparently. Talk about the casting process on that. What were you looking for to help complement the designs that you had and the vision you had for the film?
Well, the cast came assigned to the movie in a sense. When we took it over in October of 2008, it had largely been cast. We brought Craig Ferguson to the mix. And we did that because we needed a comic foil, but we also didn't realize it at the time, and it became a great benefit to us. Gerard and Craig are great friends, and so it kind of completed in a way this sort of silly buy, which is the adults all speak with a little bit of a Scottish accent, as though they are like, you find this in North America, you know, like you'll have the parents who still kind of speak with an accent of whatever motherland they came from, but the offspring have acclimatized to a new place. And so we had this cast of young American teens and Gerard Butler, and we thought, well, maybe we'll just populate the rest of the movie, the adults, with a little bit of a tinge of whatever that mother tongue was. and that's our silly conceit, but we went with it. And so largely, we're lucky to have inherited a great cast. And at the time, Jay Baruchel wasn't really known. He's going to be now, but he's such a great ad-libber, and we found that with T.J. Miller, with Christmas Plus, with Jonah Hill is amazing with his ad-libs. And so we could throw people the lines that we had written, and they'd take the intent of it and they'd just riff on it.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the comedy in the movie came from those moments in the recording studio, because it really brings a sense of spontaneity to an art form that is quite lacking in spontaneity, because everything moves at a glacial pace.
Yeah. At one point, Roger Deakins left to shoot another movie, and he was going to be gone for, say, 3 months, and he was concerned that he was going to miss a bunch of stuff. We said, no. The car will be right where you parked it.
Well, you guys both kind of also came from a background of doing 2D animation, hand-drawn animation, and now doing 3D animation, which obviously, I mean, it's nothing new, but can you maybe talk a little bit, since you both worked on like Lilo and Stitch and Mulan, going from movies like that into movies like this, where it's all 3D now, and I mean, obviously there's got to be a lot of, certain creative freedoms maybe that you don't have with 2D animation, or certain new things that maybe you weren't ready for, I guess, when you jumped onto it. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, you adjust your thinking for the tools that you have and the budget that you have. And so we made Lilo and Stitch, and we designed Lilo and Stitch to work within its time frame and its budget. And it was relatively a low-budget film for Disney at the time. That was considerably less money they spent on that film than they did a lot of other films around it. And so in Lilo and Stitch, for example, there are no shadows. There's almost never a shadow of the film because we just couldn't afford to do them. We didn't have the time and personnel. And so you.
And it seemed like every other week we had to, okay, Nani's gonna have to lose the coffee mug off her t-shirt, or you can't afford to draw pockets on their jeans. Everything added up in time.
They actually because they're all ink and painted. For example, they'll sit there with a stopwatch and they'll time how long it takes to ink and paint the character, and they'll do calculations.
Wow.
Can you get this done in the amount of time that we have? And characters like Jasmine, all those characters in all those films have always had detail taken off of them because they just couldn't accomplish it. Like, this will take 3 months too long to do Jasmine if she has this highlight. Take that off. And so that's stuff we just lived. So when we got to this film, and they have like giant furry, capes and giant beards and all sorts of detail all over them, it was already very exciting for us.
Yeah.
You're just like, yeah, just slap more on.
Like, woohoo, yeah, give him a hat.
I did notice that one character did have a lot of different appendages. You're like, oh, take away his arm, give him a spike.
Yeah, we engineered that so that every scene he had something new on.
He's got a different.
I want that toy.
Oh, yeah, I know.
So you can plug in.
But then the funny thing is, there are other things that become difficult, and you learn that because you got a character with beards and hats and stuff like that. Now he has a ton of things that he's going to collide with.
Right.
If he say jumps into water, or if perhaps it should rain on him.
Well, there's probably also a continuity, situation there to keep in mind too. Like he's got to be the same as what we saw him last time. Or
Yeah.
similar. Yeah.
In CG, it's the contact between objects that becomes very, very problematic, and they get better at doing it every year. And it's more a function of time than anything. It just takes time. Somebody said something to me once on the film, Craig Ring, and I've never forgotten it. He said, "We can do anything, but we can't do everything." So it makes a lot of sense. So if you want a character to do something that's very out of the ordinary, for example, when Toothless sits down, his rig does not like that. So when he sits down, he broke his rig pretty heavily, and you have to go in so that when they folded his tail up and they folded his head down, there are these weird creases that a bunch of character effects people had to go in and fix. And it just took a lot of time. So you can't be doing that every single scene. So now you have other things that are coming up in CG that you have to be wary of. So nothing is complete freedom. You just have to know, what to do when and stuff like that. But overall, it was absolutely fantastic working in CG. We both loved it. And one of the things we loved the best that doesn't get talked about enough is the effects. The effects in this film are just spectacular. The effects department, the effects crew was amazing, and there were a couple of particular shots. One of them is when that giant mega dragon is flying straight up and he's chasing Hiccup, and he fires that sort of pillar of fire straight up, and you cut to a side shot, and the dragon flies up through his own pillar of fire, and his wing cuts through the smoke and the flame.
Yeah.
It's just amazing. And the first
And
time we
it's
saw
funny
that,
because
we were like, oh god!
That's a self-running department in a sense. Matt Baer, who was our head of effects, it was the most fun meeting to go to because we'd walk in and we really didn't have to say anything. They would just play us these amazing explosions and effects, and we'd be like, ah, it's great! And then leave the room. Like there was no really interaction.
It was hardly. It was called approvals.
Yeah.
They got that.
You basically turned into a 5-year-old kid.
Yeah, they're like, whoa, do it again!